The official portrait of President Donald Trump to celebrate his inauguration has been unveiled, and it is one of the best presidential portraits I think we've seen in our entire history. The portrait is for the inauguration, but will also act as President Donald Trump's official portrait whenever his photos needed or his image is needed for any official documents. J.D. Vance also had a portrait that was released, but this portrait it came as part of the inaugural invitation and will be shared pretty much everywhere. I mean, we've already made T-shirts and sweatshirts, hoodies with the image on it because I know everyone's going to want one. And you can get those in the link in the description of this video below. Or if you're listening on if you're listening to the podcast, you can get one at markkaye.com, MarkKayeshop.com. markkaye.com. But President Donald Trump's inauguration, it's exciting. It's getting close and everybody is getting ready for it, especially now that President Joe Biden has issued his farewell. I won't get into Joe Biden's farewell address because this podcast is called the 47 Daily, not the 46 Daily. But let's just say it's been universally panned as one of the worst farewell speeches ever, as one of the worst goodbye addresses. It was dark. It was pessimistic. It talked about dangers on the horizon. And at the same time, it was chock full of a bunch of lies of things that Joe Biden claims that he did, but he did not do. President Donald Trump, however, has been doing things and has been achieving things that no other president could have achieved before even taking office. And one of those is the ceasefire agreement that happened yesterday, which, of course, Joe Biden took credit for. We've talked about this a lot, but the ceasefire agreement is epic. And we know it's epic because on Truth Social, Donald Trump wrote that it's epic. He wrote, the epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I am thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never again becomes a terrorist safe haven. We will continue promoting peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come for America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all of the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed so they can secure more victories for the United States. That was Donald Trump on Truth Social after what, again, can only be called an epic ceasefire agreement. Now, President Trump put this agreement together in a Truth Social post that dates back to December 2nd. That's when he famously said, "You must release the hostages or all hell will break loose." So you may remember ABC News reporting on that.
Tonight, President-elect Trump with a blunt new warning to Hamas, demanding they free the hostages before he takes office in January, or there will be, quote, all hell to pay in the Middle East.
Yeah, all hell to pay in the Middle East. And he said all hell to pay. At one point he said all hell will break out.
As you know, I gave warning that if these hostages aren't back home by that date, all hell's going to break out.
Yeah, all hell's going to break out. And people were concerned about that. They weren't really sure what was going to happen. They weren't really sure. Reporters would ask him, could you explain exactly what that means? I thought all hell will break out or all hell will break loose or there'll be hell to pay. I thought that was fairly self-explanatory, but apparently to some fake news media reporters, it's not. And Donald Trump, always happy to oblige with an explanation of the obvious.
It means it won't be pleasant. It's not going to be. It's not going to be pleasant, yeah.
And speaking of Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump, you may remember, had Steve Witkoff at his Mar-a-Lago estate for a press conference and brought him up on stage in an impromptu meeting with the press to say, hey, how's it going in the Middle East? Well, clearly it's going really well. And at that point, Steve Witkoff said, look, Donald Trump gets all the credit for this because Donald Trump puts us in a position where we have the power and the authority to negotiate on his behalf. And then he urges us to get it done, meaning you got to get it done. And then Donald Trump chimed in again saying, look, I don't want to interfere with your negotiation, but all hell's going to break loose if this doesn't get done.
He exhorts us to speak emphatically, and emphatically means you better get it. You better do this because the alternative.
Do you think they're waiting for President Trump to take office?
No, I think they heard him loud and clear. Better get done by the inaugural.
But when you say all hell will be
Before I
paid,
take office.
that all hell must be paid if they don't release the
Well, you know what that
hostages.
means, don't you? What, do I have to define it for you? Look, all
No, I know
hell
you're not
will
gonna
break out.
telegraph
If
what-
those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
Can you elaborate?
And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is.
I mean, I imagine it'll be good for us, but not for anyone involved. Yeah, with Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran or any of those other places. Look, this is a big deal, and of course, Joe Biden immediately took credit for it, which was kind of shocking. Joe Biden held a press conference and he walked out and said, "Well, we got a deal
At
done."
long last, I can announce a ceasefire and a hostage deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas.
And reporters who are not as dumb as we may think they are actually asked Joe Biden, "Wait a minute, shouldn't you? I mean, you're taking credit for this." In fact, Joe Biden said, "This is my deal."
The elements of this deal are what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council.
Yeah, so 10 months ago or 9 months ago, Joe Biden came up with a peace agreement. He's like, "Hey, it's May. Here's a peace agreement." And the rest of the world said, "This is good." But Hamas and Israel, they didn't care for it at all. Nothing ever got done until Donald Trump went on Truth Social on December 2nd and said, there'll be all hell to pay if you don't release these hostages. Well, one of these reporters actually said, "Hey, shouldn't you credit President Trump with this?"
How much credit do you give to the Trump team for this deal? Trump is already taking credit for it.
Well, you know, this is the exact framework of the deal I proposed back in May. Exact.
Yeah, Donald Trump does not get the credit, according to outgoing President Joe Biden. Joe Biden taking all credit for a ceasefire agreement that nobody wanted since May, but Donald Trump got done in a week and a half. One of the reporters again pressed him on the way out and said, "Shouldn't you give doesn't Donald Trump deserve the credit?"
Who does the history books credit for this, Mr. President? You or Trump?
Is that a joke?
The irony is that J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, or Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance actually predicted this exact thing happening. He predicted that this would happen. He predicted it on the Sunday shows, and he said, look, a couple days before Joe Biden leaves office, Donald Trump's words are going to resonate with Hamas, and they're going to come to the table with a ceasefire agreement. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened.
If you talk to world leaders, it's very clear that President Trump threatening Hamas and making it clear that there is going to be hell to pay is part of the reason why we've made progress on getting some hostages out. We're hopeful there's going to be a deal that's struck towards the very end of Biden's administration, maybe the last day or two. But regardless of when that deal is struck, it will be because people are terrified that there are going to be consequences for Hamas.
And that is exactly what happened. Just a few days before Joe Biden's term ends, just a few days before Joe Biden leaves the White House and Donald Trump takes power on January 20th, that deal was struck. And J.D. Vance called it. And no matter who's in power, no matter what's going on, there's going to be credit to the person who made that happen. And that is, of course, President Donald Trump. Now, there is another thing that's happening with Donald Trump. His staff, his administrative picks, the people that he's chosen for his positions in the cabinet seem to be doing a really great job. And apparently all of the criticism that they got on the first go round has been unwarranted, which it usually is. All the critics are being silenced. Critics in the Senate, critics in the House, critics in the media. Even some Democrats. I watched Marco Rubio yesterday. Marco Rubio gave a fantastic opening statement, which included a prayer. And yes, there were protesters, but there's always protesters. But it was interesting to watch senators on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats both, praising Marco Rubio and his accomplishments, praising him as a person, praising him as a legislator, praising him as a senator. And it was I don't think one person criticized or asked any kind of ridiculously pointed question toward Marco Rubio. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, she did get a little bit of heat. Apparently what happens is the deep state and the Democrats, they believe that Donald Trump, and this is really ironic, they believe that Donald Trump is hiring Pam Bondi so that Pam Bondi can weaponize the government against them. And the interesting thing about that is that that's exactly what's been going on. That's exactly what's been going on with Joe Biden. He weaponized the Department of Justice against Donald Trump. And Pam Bondi was very, very quick very quick to point that out.
It would not be appropriate for a prosecutor to start with a name and look for a crime. It's a prosecutor's job to start with a crime and look for a name, correct?
Senator, I think that is the whole problem with the weaponization that we have seen the last 4 years and what's been happening to Donald Trump. They targeted Donald Trump. They went after him, actually starting back in 2016. They targeted his campaign. They have launched countless investigations against him. That will not be the case if I am Attorney General. I will not politicize that office. I will not target people simply because of their political affiliation. Justice will be administered even-handedly throughout this country. Senator, we've got to bring this country back together. We've got to move forward, or we're going to lose our country.
That was Sheldon Whitehouse, by the way, who was none too happy with the fact that Pam Bondi pointed out that exactly what he was accusing her and Donald Trump of planning is exactly what Joe Biden and Merrick Garland have been doing for the past 4 years. And Donald Trump he's still staffing. They are hiring. They are hiring at a whirlwind. They've got over, in fact, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, as of today, the incoming administration has hired over 1,000 people for the United States government. They are outstanding in every way, and you will see the fruits of their labor over the coming years. We will make America great again, and it will happen very quickly. In order to save time, money, and effort, it would be helpful, this is where it gets good, if you would not send or recommend to us people who worked with or are endorsed by Americans for Prosperity, headed by Charles Koch, Dumb as a Rock John Bolton, Bird Brain Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, disloyal warmongers Dick Cheney and his psycho daughter Liz, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, General with a question mark Mark Milley, James Mattis, Mark Esper, or any of the other people Mark Esper or any of the other people suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, more commonly known as TDS. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That was Donald Trump last night at 8 o'clock. I guess they've been getting inundated with requests and resumes from people from the Nikki Haley campaign or people that used to work in Liz Cheney's office or for Mitt Romney. I guess there's a lot of Paul Ryan people that are out of work and they're looking for some kind of into the new White House. And Donald Trump is like, look, let's save everybody a lot of time. If you worked for one of my enemies, if you worked for somebody who suffers from Trump derangement syndrome, if you worked for somebody like, I don't know, a Mark Milley or James Mattis, if you worked for any of those folks, then you need not apply. It's just going to, we're going to find out who you are. We're going to see it on your resume. We're going to dig into we're going to vet you appropriately. And if you're one of those people, we don't want those folks. We want people who are loyal to President Trump and his agenda. We want people who have not worked for backstabbers. We want people who have always been on the side of making America great again and putting America first and helping Americans grow to the biggest and the best of their abilities. We've always been on the side of conservatism. We've always been on the side of President Trump since day one, despite through thick and thin. People like Pam Bondi, for example, people like Marco Rubio, who, yes, ran against President Donald Trump, but when he realized, I'm not going to win, was very quick to ally himself with Donald Trump so that they could work diligently. And now that's paying off in dividends. So President Donald Trump has a lot of work left to do. There's a lot of positions still left to go. We're still not even to the inauguration. Now, the good news is on day one, there will be a lot of executive orders and a lot of action taken. On day one, a lot of Donald Trump's staff will be in place. However, the Senate is playing politics with some of his picks. A handful of nominees who were supposed to have Senate confirmation hearings this week were postponed because the FBI was not able to complete their background checks. Doug Burgum, for example, Secretary of the Interior, Kristi Noem, they had their Senate hearings postponed until after the inauguration because, well, the FBI couldn't do its job. This is another one of the reasons why the FBI needs new leadership. This is one of the reasons why Pam Bondi as the Attorney General and Kash Patel as the head of the FBI need to be in place as soon as possible. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the Democrats are dragging their feet. In fact, Pam Bondi mentioned Kash Patel and how well qualified he was for that job yesterday in her hearing.
Yes.
Would you have hired someone into the Florida Attorney General's office who you knew had an enemies list?
Senator, to cut to the chase, you're clearly talking about Kash Patel. I don't believe he has an enemies list. He made a quote on TV, which I have not heard, I saw your sign, or Senator Durbin's sign, about Kash. But I know that Kash Patel has had 60 jury trials as a public defender, as a prosecutor. He has great experience in the Intel Department, Department of Defense. I have known Kash, and I believe that Kash is the right person at this time for this job. You'll have the ability to question Mr. Patel.
And I'm questioning you right now
do.
about whether you will enforce an enemies list that he announced publicly on television.
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry. There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, at least not after the next few days. I'm sure there's an enemies list right now. In fact, I think there is an enemies list. It's a list with one name on it, and that name is Donald J. Trump, who will soon be inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States. And if you'd like to celebrate with a President Donald Trump official inaugural portrait t-shirt or hoodie or apron or any other travel mug, make sure you visit markkshop.com, or just click the link in the description of this video if you're watching online, markkshop.com. In the meantime, we have so much more to cover. Like I said, there are going to be more hearings. There's more news from outside the realm of Donald Trump world. There's more news from all over the political spectrum, and we cover all of it along with interviews and commentary in our Mark Kaye Saves the Republic daily podcast, which you can find anywhere you download podcasts. We'll get into Joe Biden and his speech. We'll bring you the real lowlights from what Joe Biden was saying yesterday as he was bidding adieu to this country and giving it some very stern warnings. All of that coming up. It's noon today, live on Rumble and YouTube and other places, other various streaming platforms. But also, you can download the podcast. Go to iTunes, go to Spotify, go to wherever you get your podcasts. Search Mark Kaye Saves the Republic. Download, listen, and enjoy.